So let's talk about exercise as a whole for people in the perimenopause, menopausal phases of their lives. So when it comes to women in their training, from my experience, when I train people in that sort of stage, who they tend to go down the route of they've done a lot of circuit training, a lot of classes. They enjoy that community aspect and stuff, and which is great. And doing classes and things are fantastic for that, as well as improving their fitness as a whole. But what would you suggest is sort of the best form of exercise? Because I would suggest, when we're talking about cortisol and talking about those stressors, that high levels of high intensity impact and causing real spikes of heart rate is going to cause real spikes of stress and cortisol. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, if you are a perimenopausal woman and you are having a menstrual cycle, there are two distinct phases of a menstrual cycle. So we have an estrogen dominant phase, which is roughly the first 2 weeks based on a 28 to 30 day cycle. And then we have the latter half of post-ovulation. So ovulation is in the middle somewhere. And then you've got the last 2 weeks, which is the progesterone dominant phase. So your body does not understand the gym. Your body is there, and if you're having a cycle, it's there because it's like, oh, at some point I'm going to get pregnant. I'm going to have a pregnancy. There's going to be a baby. So in the first 2 weeks of your menstrual cycle, which is the estrogen dominant phase, women find that they are hitting their personal bests. They are able to train a lot harder. They are able to train with weights and resistance training and really get the gains and see, more muscle on their bodies. And if they're having their stats done again, they're seeing a lot more changes. They're less bloated, and they're able to really stick to a routine. So when you get to the middle half of the cycle where you ovulate, and then you get to the progesterone dominant phase, that's when your body starts to store more minerals. That's when your blood volume is increasing because the body thinks, oh, an egg has come down, we're going to have a baby. So you get more sluggish. And then you get more tired, and then you feel more pain. And so if you are lifting those really heavy weights that you were for the first 2 weeks, you are feeling more pain. You're thinking, what's going on? I'm not hitting my personal best. I feel like utter crap. What is going on with me? And if you're training with a personal trainer that understands your menstrual cycle as a whole, then they can train you through the different phases of your menstrual cycle and get you where you need to go. Because ultimately, if your goal is weight loss, and you are training at exactly the same intensity throughout the whole month, you won't necessarily see that weight loss if you are weighing yourself in your progesterone half of the cycle, which is where you've got more blood volume and you're more bloated and you're more constipated because the body is holding on to those minerals and vitamins and macronutrients because it thinks at some point there's going to be a baby.
Yeah, so it wants to create some reserves. So yeah,
and then that's really demoralizing sometimes for women because they're like, I don't understand. I've trained amazingly. I've been with my PT. We're doing all the stats, the measurements. All these things are happening, but at the latter stage of my cycle, I'm just getting bigger. I'm getting heavier, and I'm not understanding what's going on. And then you've got a slight difference here when you get to the menopause and the postmenopausal stage, where the hormones are not as up and down as they would have been if you were having a menstrual cycle. So you are able to consistently train, and that's the point where estrogen levels are at their lowest, progesterone levels and testosterone levels are at their lowest. So you need to concentrate on bone health. Estrogen is responsible for bone formation, and if you don't take care of your bones, you could be at risk for osteoporosis. So this is a time where resistance training, training with weights is an amazing idea, because you want to be able to pick yourself up and walk. I know that there's lots of people thinking, oh, is that it? I want to do way more than just walk. But when you look at women in, their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, some of them are, using frames and, they're not able to hold their own body weight. They need to train with their own body weight. They need to be able to hold up their body and their frames, when they get into their 50s, 60s, 70s, because you don't want to be reliant on, wheelchairs or, aids to walk around. You need to be able to be strong enough to hold your own frame. So that is really important.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to resistance training or going into sort of more heavy load resistance training, not necessarily really one rep maxing, anything like that, but actually just sort of anywhere from 12 to 15 repetitions, progressive overload. People don't realise that, okay, that's going to help with increasing muscle growth or maintaining muscle tissue ultimately as well. But it does help with actual bone health, like you say. It's actually helping. Every single time we do resistance training, there are tiny little microscopic tears in the muscle, and they will grow either as they repair, they will either grow bigger or help with maintenance, dependent on, okay, where you are in terms of stage of life, how much testosterone you have, how high levels of protein that you're eating can help with that as well. But that's exactly the same for bone. Bone's doing exactly the same. When you're doing that resistance training, you're creating little micro breakages within that bone, so they are having to repair stronger. And so doing resistance training is doing exactly what you're saying there. The bone health from resistance training is massive.
Yeah, and if you think about insulin resistance, so we have an issue here when our hormones are declining. There's a direct correlation between those hormones and the amount of insulin resistance that we are experiencing. And when we are in stressful situations, our body thinks, oh my God, I'm going to get eaten by a lion. I need to start running. So blood sugar is then released from the cells and is floating around our bodies. And over time, when you experience long-term stressors or your hormones are declining, your insulin levels are not where they should be. So then you are putting on more fat. You are, instead of, it being stored as glycogen in the liver or in muscle, it's then being stored as fat, abdominal adipose fat. And if you're exercising and you are increasing your muscle mass, you are also stabilising those insulin levels. And that is what you need moving forward.
Which is, so with regards to sort of circling back to where we started, if you were working with a client, so a PT is about to work with a client, would you then sort of state with that resistance is the way forward, from if you're starting with them in their late 30s, they're not even at perimenopausal, doing some CV work is great, it's going to help with their aerobic health, but actually just moving them into the space of resistance training and lifting functionally, using the free weights, the barbells, all those things, you'd suggest that from day one, try and find a pathway for them to enjoy that and make that part of their routine.
Absolutely, because as a personal trainer or a therapist of any kind, you need to look at the future for your client. Even if you're going to work with your client for 12 weeks, 10 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it is, and then they're going to go on their way, you need to set them up so that they understand the fundamentals of where they need to be going in the future. And if it's all about just, okay, you want to lose weight for now, okay, let's get you on the treadmill, let's keep running because you might lose a few pounds because you're going on holiday next week. That's not your goal. I mean, obviously you work with your client, and if that is your client's only goal, then fair enough, maybe for the short term, that is how you will work with your client. But at the same time, you will be talking to them about the future, about future-proofing their health. And that is where I think resistance training, weight training, working with your own body weight is, the way forward.
Fantastic.